I am Sierra Vance, and I am 32 years old. The night of the acquisition gala was supposed to be the night my family celebrated becoming billionaires. It was meant to be a flawless evening filled with applause, champagne, and congratulations. Instead, it became the night my father looked me directly in the eyes and erased 10 years of my life with a single sentence. The ballroom was packed with tech moguls, venture capitalists, politicians, and journalists. Crystal glasses clinked, expensive champagne flowed freely, and the air was thick with ambition and artificial smiles. I waited patiently until my father raised his glass to give his toast. I placed my purse down, stood up calmly, and watched him sign the papers that would eventually destroy everything he believed he owned. Before I tell you what happened when the massive screens behind him turned on, I want you to ask yourself something. Have you ever been the one doing all the work while someone else took all the credit? Tell me in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is right now, because I want to know who is part of this community. You are just the mechanic, Sierra. We do not need a mechanic where we are going. Hand over your key card. You are fired. My father said those words while staring at me without hesitation. We were sitting at the dinner table earlier that same day when he announced that he was selling our company for $2.5 billion. He handed the credit, the future, and the money to my brother Brent, a man who could barely turn on a computer. Then he looked at me and dismissed a decade of my work in less than 10 seconds. I did not scream. I did not beg. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my key fob, and dropped it into my water glass. I told him goodbye, stood up, walked out of the house, and got into my car. He believed he had won. He believed he owned the company, the code, and me. As I drove away, I was not sad. I was thinking about a piece of paper hidden in a dusty box in my closet, a document that proved he did not own a single thing. I drove my 10-year-old sedan through the winding roads of Mercer Island as rain hammered against the windshield. The wipers struggled to keep up, and the inside of the car smelled like stale coffee and exhaustion. It was nothing like the leather and polished wood of the dining room I had just left behind. Yet for the first time in 10 years, the air felt breathable. As the estate disappeared in my rearview mirror, my thoughts drifted back to the beginning of what I now call the lost decade. 10 years earlier, Vance Logistics was not a billion-dollar empire. It was failing. I remember the night I dropped out of my PhD program in 2014. I walked into my father's office and found him sobbing at his desk. The bank was threatening foreclosure, the fleet was grounded, and everything was collapsing. He looked at me and said he was going to lose everything. I was 22 years old, and I loved him. I made a choice that defined the next 10 years of my life. I quit school and moved into the server room. For 2 years, I took no salary. I slept on a yoga mat under humming server racks and used my hoodie as a pillow. I rewrote the entire logistics kernel from scratch, line by line, night after night. I built the dynamic routing algorithm that eventually saved the company millions in fuel costs. I built the system that turned a dying business into a global empire. While I coded until my eyes burned and my hands cramped, my brother Brent was consulting, which was the family's polite word for gambling away company money in Las Vegas. I processed the expense reports myself. Tens of thousands spent on luxury dinners, sports cars, and hotels. I drove a Honda with a glowing check engine light that I could not afford to fix, while Brent drove a car worth more than my annual rent. When I raised concerns, my mother told me Brent was the face of the company and that I worked in the background, so appearances did not matter. 6 months into my work, my father called me into his office with a calculated look on his face. He said payroll taxes and benefits were too expensive and that he needed to move me off payroll. He fired me as an employee and rehired me as an independent contractor. He told me it was just paperwork and that I was still family. What he did not understand was the law. Employees create work for hire, which belongs to the company. Contractors do not, unless ownership is explicitly transferred. I signed that agreement believing I was losing my security. In reality, I was gaining ownership of everything I built. That night, back in my small apartment, I gave myself 5 minutes to grieve. I cried for the girl who believed that working harder would earn love and respect. Then I stopped. I opened my closet, pulled down a labeled box, and found the contractor agreement. I read the clause aloud. If the company did not purchase the intellectual property rights for $10 million within 10 years, ownership reverted to me. The deadline had passed 3 days earlier. The chain snapped in that moment. I gathered proof. I opened my private mirrored repository that I had maintained for years at my own expense. I pulled the complete commit history. Every major system, every foundational algorithm, every update was authored by me. My brother's contribution amounted to nothing more than guest Wi-Fi usage. I printed everything, compiled it, and placed it in a black folder. Then I put on the charcoal gray suit I had bought for the day I would become CEO. That night, I walked into the acquisition gala. I passed security, accessed the AV booth, and loaded the evidence onto the system. When my father signed the deal, I triggered the presentation. The screens lit up with the contract, the reversion clause, the commit logs, and the copyright notice. The room froze. The deal collapsed instantly. Lawyers surged. Security surrounded my father, not me. Months later, the company was seized, the assets liquidated, and the empire fell. I bought the remains, rebuilt the system properly, gave equity to the workers, and started again under a new name. Today, I sit in my office overlooking the water, watching the rain clear and the sun break through. I did not inherit my life. I reclaimed it.